21st century that you might Google your name and learn some stuff that even you didn't know about yourself. And in talking to John earlier today, he thought he would check out his exposure to this risk, and he Googled John Oldham. And he found there were 25 of them. And one of them was an NBA player, but he's not that one. One of them was a pro baseball player, but no, he's not that one either. In fact, he couldn't find a reference to himself at all, which is probably the best place to be. John worked in Parkland School Division as an administrator for 26 years, 21 of which he was principal at Mill Grove and Woodhaven. And he retired in 2001 and has been running a business with his wife since then, and is father to how many kids? Three? Three kids. One of whom is you all know very well, David, who runs the Children's Back of our Foundation with his sister. So, without further ado, John, please come tell us all about it.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you very much. Is it okay if I don't use a mic? I like standing behind the mic. Kind of messed up the duties last week up here because I got messed up around Edinburgh, Herbie, and the Eskimos. So anyway, I'll try and do a better job of this job. I'm going to give you the short version because in talking to a couple of people, I didn't know it's called classification, and I understand classification is about job and what we've done as a career. But I also understand, especially in my case, and I suspect most people's cases, that there's a story behind the story. So let me, hopefully that doesn't bore you. I'll tell you the boring part first, in my perspective. My wife would have liked to have been here. She can't. It's in our business the end of the month, and so she has other obligations. So the short version is I was born in 1946 in Vancouver. And I was born to what? Somebody that just came back from England, right? My sister was born in 1942. I have one sibling. She was born just after he left. And so I have one sibling, mom and dad, and we ended up in Kamloops a number of years after that. And by the time I was in grade 2, most of my grade 2 career in school was out of school because I had rheumatic fever for most of a year. I was in hospital for 90 days, and I don't know what I missed in that year, but I think that explains some of behind the story later. So I graduated from Kamloops in the mid-60s, 1964, and went to UBC. My wife, who was born in Edmonton, lived in Peace River, then in Edmonton, went to the coast to get into nursing, and so we met. We got married, and when I graduated from university, we traveled, and we were in Europe for a year and a half. The first year I ever taught was in England. And we came back a year and a half later. Literally, the plane landed in Edmonton rather than Vancouver because it was cheaper. And Sue's dad was on his way to Hawaii and said, "You want to look after the house and your younger sister?" And we said, "Sure." And I got a job in Winterburn School. In those days, it was part of the county parkland. In January of 75. There's a few years missing there, so I'll explain them after. Okay. So I applied for a principalship in the trailer park, Winterburn. I'm not sure what it's called, north of the highway there. But I ended up getting an assistant principalship in the fall of 1975 in Queen Street School. And I was there for 2 years as assistant principal. In its second year, and now this is for those people that were around, they know that there was a large boom in schools in those days. And the second year of that, 1970, this is a little history for you, 1976 to 1977, Woodhaven School students who were in portables had come over to Millgrove, to Queen Street. There were 1,000 kids on that site, and portables all over the place. Classes in gyms, all of that kind of stuff. But the future principal of Millgrove, which is to be opened in 77, was assistant principal at Woodhaven and joining our two schools at Queen Street in 76, 77, 1,000 people there. His name was Greg Jiglin. And the following year, Millgrove was going to be opened, and then Woodhaven went back to Woodhaven, and And so Greg and I got together, and he opened, as the principal of Mill Grove in '77, a school that had the design from a curriculum point of view, daily phys ed, increased fine arts, and academics. And it was one of the first schools in Western Canada. There was a couple in Saskatchewan that had daily phys ed in 1977. I was there for assistant principal for 3 years. Greg moved on to other things, has since passed away. You might know his wife still lives in town here, and he's got 2 kids in the area and some grandchildren. He's a great guy. So in '77 to '80, I was assistant principal. In '80, I became principal, and I was there until '92. And in '92, I moved over to Woodhaven and was principal there for 9 years. So 5 years as assistant, and then 21 years as principal. And in 2001, along with an esteemed counselor, we retired from Woodhaven, Judy's husband. It was 201, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
It is amazing. And I have been out of the school system since then. My wife says that, actually my son became a teacher, who you know, one of them, when I retired, and she often says that the system could only handle one of us. He's much more congenial than I ever was as an administrator. So, and I retired in 2001 at 55. I'm 66 now, and I joined my wife in a network marketing company called Bodywise, and then 6 years ago we transitioned to a company called New Skin, and so have been involved there for 11 and a half years. So, the story behind the story. I never was a good student. I barely got out of high school. I could hardly wait to get out of Hamlin's. I didn't have a 57 Chev. My buddies did. No, anyway, it's okay. Everybody in the 60s loved 57 Chevs. You guys are too young. It's okay. And I went to UBC. In those days, in the good old days, $500 a year for tuition. I worked in the mining industry in the summertime, percussion drilling and diamond drilling. My summer after grade 12, I worked out of for a company called Diamond Drilling. No, I was not going to remember the name of it. 60 days in a row, 10 hours a day, and so I had a fair amount of money in my little 18-year-old jeans. Went off to UBC. In those days, you had to take a course all year long, so I took 5 courses. I passed 3. Pretty good. Next year, I went back. I actually played for the University of British Columbia Thunderbirds football in 1965, and that year I passed 1 course. In those days, you could volunteer to leave, and I volunteered to leave. And I went and did a number of things, including working in the mining industry, primarily percussion drilling, doing some diamond drilling in Ashcroft, the mining area around Bethlehem in Josco. Not Josco, that was the company I worked for, Lornex in Bethlehem. And then I finally decided that wasn't really all that interesting. The bar in Ashcroft got boring after a while. And I went back to university, so I'm 4 years out of high school. Took 5 courses. I didn't fail any. Yeah. January, I got my student loan, and my buddy and I went on a cultural exchange to Mexico. Mardi Gras. It's cultural, isn't it? We actually bought a couple of bikes, they weren't in those days, in Tucson, and started pedaling them into Mexico. And it was hot and dry and whatever, that didn't last very long. So anyway, 5 years out of high school, I finally go back that next fall to Vancouver City College and end up 2 years later at 25 with a diploma in recreation. I played my history and wasn't in the NBA, but I did play basketball for Vancouver City College in those years. Wasn't much of a basketball player, but anyway, so I got to 25 years old with a diploma in recreation. I didn't know what to do with it. Sorry. The park empire of recreation. And both my parents were teachers, so I was avoiding that like the plague. And I was interested in stuff. I was interested in politics and economics, that kind of thing. In 1968, I was born in British Columbia, so I was this is my excuse, socialist, right? I checked the internet this morning. I thought this was Winston Churchill's quote, but it is not, by the way. If you're not a socialist when you're young, you don't have a, and if you're not a capitalist when you're old, you don't have a brain, right? If you're not a socialist when you're young, you don't have a heart. If you're not a capitalist when you're old, you don't have a brain. So I was born in BC, and there you go. I was in 1968, interesting, last night thinking about my speech, so thank you, Rotary, for kind of creating an opportunity for people to think about their lives. I was in the faculty club at UBC, uninvited, with an activist out of the States, Jerry Rubin, and it was all the anti-war stuff, right, in the 60s, that kind of stuff, and we took over the faculty club. Well, I don't even know what happened if my kids took the faculty club over at the University of Alberta. I'd flip a lid. And a few years later, we were chanting up Dave Barrett, who became the first NDP premier of Columbia in Port Coquitlam in the arena there. I can't remember what year that was. I think it was 1972. And so those were my early years. I went back into education when I was 25, that fall married, and I decided to go into elementary education because I thought that's where it happened. Is that right, Judy?
It is.
It is. And I took reading, not that I was interested in reading, because I thought that's what happened. So I graduated from university at 27. Okay? When I graduated, I thought, I'm going to change education. Yeah, sure. I'm going to become a principal. Yeah, sure. And we were married 2 years. I was 27, so we traveled. We ended up in England, and one day we were in a little town called Norwich, Norfolk, and it was about September the 20th, and in the railway station was an ad for a teacher. And we went back to London and bought a couple of mopeds and traveled up to Norwich, and I taught there for a year, and Sue worked in an office. So that fall we traveled in Europe, came back November of 74, so we're gone 18 months. Landed in Edmonton. Sue's dad was a successful businessman in Edmonton. Sue was born in Edmonton, but the family lived in Peace River, and he was involved. He actually started work when he was 15 years old in 1935 in the McDonald Hotel, in the kitchens. In the war, he became a cook. After the war, he became trying to put pieces, living together as a cook with the CNR. And then they went to Peace River. He did a number of things. And he ended up with a company called, I don't know if anybody's in the oil and gas industry, but a company in those days called Forshey and Associates. He was an associate. They had oil rig camps. New thing. And so in the early 50s, he was the cook, and he could cook food, and he could work, and he could drive truck like crazy, and he got associated with these guys building camps, and they built a big business in the oil and gas camp and catering industry, and that's Sue's history. One of Sue's brothers formed PTI, which has got a place out in the industrial park here in the 70s. Sue's dad's name is over the Nate Culinary, Hokinson. Her maiden name is Hokinson. And if you've ever gone to the restaurant in Nate, I don't know if you have, it's called Ernest's. That's my father-in-law. So there you go. So there's a history there, oil and gas, and they've done well financially. So we came back, and he gave us a place to live. He went off to Hawaii. We looked after Sue's younger sister, and one of her brothers was the principal in Entwistle, Robert Hokinson, or Lodgepole, I can't remember. He was in both. And he said, hey, why don't you work out here? And I got a job at, as I said, Winterberg. That fall, the next fall, 75, I moved over to Queen Street, and I told you the story about Queen Street. Broxton Park was the high school in those days, in Spruce Grove. And then the whole evolution of schools from Millgrove to Woodhaven to Brookwood began in the 70s. So I was involved in that school at Millgrove for 15 years. 12 years as principal, 3 years as assistant principal. One of the interesting, so that was, Millgrove is on a little corner down here, and it's called Millgrove because of, still testing question, Miller, the farmstead. It was a Miller farmstead on that corner. First house we had was on Millgrove Drive, and I mean, everything was just brand new. The house we live in now, we moved into, and we live in Woodhaven, just south of the high school. And we moved into in 1982, we've been in the same house ever since. So we have, as I better get back to the kids here, we have 3 kids. Sue was a nurse in her early days, stayed home with the kids. That was an opportunity we had. David, our oldest, is 36, and for those people that were here the other day, and those people involved in Rotary and Children of Ecuador know David. He had a gift from Boston, and he worked there 7 years in the bar, back in the good old days when we had our own skill test in question, mugs. Mugs, right? We would show up at the door on Thursdays. We always used to go Thursdays. And our mugs with John and Sue would come off the rack. Remember those days, Janice? Jessica? So Matthew is 34. So David has 2 little girls, Nevaeh, who's 3, and Zoe, who's 1. His brother Matthew has a degree from University of Lethbridge. He's also got a CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. He works for the Canadian Western Bank in syndicated loans downtown. And we have a daughter. She's 30. She escaped. She has a diploma in marketing from Nate, and she flew the coop and is in Toronto. We were talking at that table about kids living far away. She's been there for 3.5 years. She is the director of marketing for Easy Home, which is a merchandising company for appliances and furniture. They have a store over here beside Rona. They have 200 stores here. And she has a boyfriend who has a family and who has a cabin at the lake in Ontario, so she's done for the East. We cry over that one. And Matthew has 2 little girls as well, so we have 4 granddaughters, 3 and under. Matthew has a little girl that's 1 today, and a little girl that's 3 next week, so about 3 months younger than David's. And so 4 little granddaughters, 3 and under, that keeps us busy as well. I had one of them at gymnastics this morning, the aerials, and I'm really pleased to see that hopefully that there will be a new aerial facility over here in the next 2 or 3 years. Interesting little piece of history. Nobody really knows, but it really doesn't matter. We opened Millgrove in '77 with emphasis on phys ed. And because of that, we hired some people that had phys ed degrees and interests. And because of that, and some community support, Mara Smith, an elderly gal in town, was a great supporter of gymnastics. We started the aerials in Millgrove in the late 70s or early 80s. I can't remember exactly what year it was. And had enrollments each session up to 200 people. We had all of the Olympic equipment in that gym, and it was a real struggle because it had to be taken up and down, and like this, it was kind of a yo-yo. But it started there, and gymnastics is a great foundation for any athletic endeavor, probably the fundamental skill set for anybody that wants to do anything else. Went to Woodhaven Junior High in 92 to 2001, and I think we had a great school there, and we had a number of people that you know. John Ryan, who was involved in drama, went on to the high school, was passionate about drama, had a big club. We had Darryl Weisenberger, who's moved over to Memorial Comp, passionate about vocal and instrumental. We had art, we had great lab work. We had Roy McConnell, who some of you know, that loved outdoor education and sports and athletics, and he would take people to the mountains and teach them things. He could teach them to read and write in Catamount as well as anybody could in any classroom. So many of you know Roy. So I came to 55 11 years ago and thought, well, I've been doing this long enough. We had a great school. We had kind of, in terms of balance of opportunity for kids to come to do things they liked to do and stay in school, that kind of thing. And I came to a conclusion that I'd done as much as I could and was going to leave at 55. Kind of had my run and didn't really know what I was going to do when I retired. Sue had been with a small nutritional company called BodyWise for 5 or 6 years at that point in time, and had a small business. I joined her that fall. She was a little bit surprised. She asked me what I was going to do. I said, I don't know. that home-based business nutritional company for, let me see how, am I over your time? Who's watching the time? For 4 or 5 years, and then that company went down, and we went with a number of other people looking for another company, and we found a company called New Skin. It's a big international, publicly traded New York Stock Exchange company, and we joined them 6 years ago because of nutrition, because of the ability, we had some technology that could measure antioxidants in 90 seconds, basically. So we found out a little while later that skincare, from a business point of view, is a large business as well. And in 3 years, and now here's our situation as well. A story we tell many times in our industry. Sue stayed home with the kids, 0 pension. I looked at my T4 for my teacher's pension because it just came in the other day. Last year I earned gross $32,921. I had a pension going back 11 years before some of the big increases of 14% back in the mid 2003 or 4, something like that. We had a small nest egg, right? And you know what's happened with that nest egg? Happened to many people in North America. We spent some of it. We somehow seem to be doing pretty good at that. We helped our kids with university. We redecorated the house, and we lost some on the 207, 208 change in the economy. So we ended up with small pension. Doesn't get us to Ecuador. Does not get us to Ecuador. Does not get me with my grandchildren to gymnastics, as a matter of fact. And in the course of 3 years with New Skin, we were able to develop a 6-figure income from that aspect of our business. And so we have been able to develop financial security with New Skin. Now, perspectives around that industry, network marketing, are kind of interesting. And I think there's, if I can just make a comment, not to go on too long here, about that industry. In education, my passion was to find ways for kids and teachers as well to be successful, because I hadn't been very successful. So as a principal, when I sat in my office in whichever school I was in, I had a pretty good empathy for kids that were struggling, because I had been in their shoes. And so my gift to education was that kind of thing, to help support schools that had multiple programs, whether it be phys ed, fine arts, or academics. At Woodhaven, we also have lots of languages. There was French immersion, and there were 3 second languages taught in that school at that time too, which is a little bit of a nightmare from a scheduling and staffing point of view. But French, of course, and German and Japanese. And those languages, the second languages in Alberta, are dwindling pretty quickly. For whatever reason, I really don't know. So my passion in education was to change education. Right? And there's been a fellow, I think, was in a Rotary magazine recently, Saul Khan from Khan Academy. I think he was. He's been on CNN, he's been on Charlie Rose, all those kind of. I think if anybody in North America can change education, it's probably him. And it's because of a combination of approach to education and technology. Anyway, just of interest. My passion to change education may actually end up happening secondarily, peripherally, in Ecuador. Interestingly enough, it's, you know, I don't, and maybe by generations, not personally. So let me just comment about our industry a little bit, because I just want to do that. We have, working with, and it's the same set of principles that has driven me in education, is to find ways in this industry, which is simple but not easy, to have people be successful. We have 95 people that work with us in Western Canada directly as business people. Last year they generated $3.5 million worth of revenue, and we get a percentage of that. It's a network marketing. And what I find very interesting is and you guys are business people, what's happening in North America. Because there is no question the media and economists talk about the difficulty for the middle class. There's a divergence between the upper class and the poor. We can look at, and what's happened, I didn't know, I didn't have time in the last couple of days to check the stats, but it'd be very interesting to me, and maybe I will do this. What's happening to the business that's registered with the city or the Chamber of Commerce? What are the proportional changes between small business and maybe franchises or box stores, home-based businesses? Because it's changing, I believe, dramatically. What's happened in Spruce Grove in 20 years, 30 years since I've been here? Franchises, box stores. What's also happened is online shopping. I virtually don't buy a book in a bookstore anymore, as an example. I don't have a paper. I've actually learned to do what the kids do, read my phone, which is somewhat amazing to me, but I can actually do that. Globe and Mail last weekend had a study out of Southern Ontario, precarious employment. 50% of the people in Southern Ontario that are working are what they would call it precariously employed. Which means what? No benefits or minimal benefits. No pension plan, part-time, no security. When I grew up, you worked for a company like whatever, used to be TELUS, and then they went, downsizing, right-sizing, capsizing all took place. Nortel in Alberta, secure company, and then it went downsized, and then a few years later, what happened? It capsized. Done. No benefits, no payouts. And so the economy is changing. So that was precarious. 50% of the people in Southern Ontario were precarious employment. And my translation of that in the short term is no economic stability. Stability, no long-term stability. Investments have gone where? If you have $1 million in the bank or in mutual funds or whatever the case is, how much you make in a month? Not enough to go to Ecuador. I guarantee you. Right? Who's got $1 million? When you look at the population. Maclean's magazine, we were in California, and I was in an airport in January. The young people, and talking about young educated people, are what? Underemployed. Same set of characteristics. Poor benefit plans or marginal benefit plans, no retirement plans, no long-term security with their jobs, and debt. And debt. Right? Those things are changing. So what is happening? We are a distribution channel. And I believe, I know it's not, we have a great company, and we have an industry which is, some people are struggling for sure. I get that. And companies that have come and gone, I get that. But I look at our opportunity. Sue tells a story. She turned 63 the other day. At 57, where else in this economy, in this North America, she have started an opportunity looking at second line of income and developed a six-figure income in 3 years? Very simple answer. Nowhere. And our passion about this industry is the same as my passion in education, is to find as many ways and support to create success for as many people as possible. Our son David works with us. His wife used to work part-time, from home part-time with Alberta basketball. Go figure. Basketball teams, both of them. She's staying at home now. She has a small income from our business, as in his, and he would like to, over the course of another number of years, be able to have some freedom to coach at the college level, which is very difficult right now because there's no money in it. And also, if you're coaching at the Spruce Grove Comp and in college, then you don't have a life with your kids. It's done, right? And so he would like to have that opportunity, and it's not easy to do through the normal mechanisms. And I know what's happening with our company in the next few years. He will be able to have an opportunity to stay at home or work part-time and coach at the college level, pick his kids up from school, and coach his daughters when he wants to at his own whim. Nu Skin, just as a plug, I don't want to get defensive about Nu Skin, gone up 63% in the last 3 years. Last year achieved $2 billion worth of sales, and that for those people that are into looking at markets and seeing what's going on, that's going straight up because of technology and innovation. Because we have innovation and technology in the anti-aging arena, that goes to what's called a genetic base. And half of that revenue of $2 billion last year was based on a new product line, a new brand coming out that just came out in the last 3 years. A number of products, both from a skincare and nutritional perspective, that have the ability to change our gene activity. It was on the Discovery Channel in Asia, late December. You can check it out on YouTube. You can check anything out on YouTube. It'll be on the Discovery Channel. I think April or May in North America. Anyway, perspectives. Any questions? Yes?
What do you think of Rotary so far?
Well, service above self, right? I've never been a joiner in my whole life. For those people that know George Huff, he walked into Mill Grove probably in the early 80s and he said, "We need you in the rec board." And so I went and served with the Recreation Board in Spruce Grove for a number of years. I was chair of the Recreation Board for a while. You know, my passion to create success with Travel Paramount, in education and now in network marketing. Lloyd Cullum and I are friends way back from the Banff Jasper relay days. I actually did that a couple of times in the middle of the night when nobody else saw me. And he said, "Come join because it's about service," and that suits me perfectly well. And I find it very interesting, and I do a lot of reading to try and figure out, you know, what service actually has an effect. So it's nice to participate in a group of people that have a number of purposes. Kinship is one of them. Perfect. Service above self. Perfect. Taking a look at how we can make a contribution to our local community, to Ecuador, to Africa. You know, and they're very difficult questions. So I like being part of that discussion. I like having the kinship that it offers. So, I haven't won the draw yet.